I'm Steve Bowsher, not Steve Blank, and I'm the CEO of In-Q-Tel. I've been at In-Q-Tel for 18 years. If you're not familiar with In-Q-Tel, In-Q-Tel is an independent, not-for-profit, a 501c3 that invests on behalf of the U.S. intelligence community in emerging technology startup companies with the goal of facilitating the piloting and adoption of those technologies by the agencies that we work with. We were founded by CIA actually 25 years ago. They created us, but today we now work with the entire IC. CIA, NSA, FBI, DIA, NGA, NRO, CBP, TSA, CISA, Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, so secure, they have security twice in their name. And then some components of the DoD. So we work with US Navy, we work with US CENTCOM, and we work with the US Space Force. We also work with the Australian and the British governments. So we have 15 different partnership relationships. We've been investing in this space for a long time. We're excited to see so much interest in it. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, there wasn't this much interest in it, but it's really matured as an industry and as a segment of the venture capital industry. And we think that's great for the country and great for entrepreneurs like AJ. So is that good enough for you, Steve? All right, AJ, we'll have you sit. Thanks. I'll sit here. I'll grab my list of questions here and we'll get started. So, AJ, before we start anything else, I love a good origin story. So tell me where you grew up, how you got to where you were ready to start Hermeus.
All right, very good. So AJ Piplica. I was born in New York. Contrary to what most people think, there's a big joke going around that I was born in Canada. It's not. Yeah, New York, right outside of the city, Westchester County. I lived there until I was about 6, and then moved down to Florida, down to Tampa, so grew up there. And then came to Georgia Tech in Atlanta in 2005 for undergrad there. So studied aerospace engineering. How I picked that, I really always liked things that fly, and I like to build things. I didn't really know what aerospace engineering was. I thought aeronautical engineering had a cooler name, it was more real, but decided to go to a school that was pretty well ranked. I learned very, very quickly what it was. I think my first introduction to aerospace engineering class, first day the professor comes in and asks like, okay, everybody write down your 3 favorite airplanes. And I'm like, Delta? This is like how much not of a cool aerospace engineer I was. So I learned pretty quickly, got my first internship working out at NASA Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And that was a pretty interesting opportunity. It was a co-op, so I got to go back a couple times doing different things originally. So I got to work on it's called the Wing Leading Edge Impact Detection System for the space shuttle. So after the Columbia accident, they instrumented the space shuttle with a bunch of accelerometers to see if it got hit by foam or micrometeoroids or anything like that to make sure the astronauts were safe coming back. So I worked that for a little bit, and then started to get into the things that actually like set me down this path to building a hypersonic aircraft company. And that came through my second tour down at Johnson, where I got to work in a part of the center that focused on analysis of lunar landers coming back and landing on the moon. They wanted to understand where all the dust goes. Because if you want to build a moon base, you need solar panels, and they wanted to know how far away do we have to put the landing pad. So I got into what was called direct simulation Monte Carlo analysis, basically computational fluid dynamics for non-continuum or rarefied flows. So basically like flows in a vacuum, where molecules act more like billiard balls than actual fluid. So started in the analysis land there, and then the same group there was working on a bunch of space shuttle reentry, aero heating analysis, and testing. And I got to dip my feet in there, and that I really, really loved. So I got hooked on aerodynamics and space at the same time, which was a mistake, because they didn't tell me that it's just a vacuum up there. So there's not much for an aerodynamicist to do, other than rocket engines or reentry. Me liking airplanes and wanting to get into those kinds of things, I found the little niche thank you, that kind of bridged all of those things along with what I really liked, which was hypersonics. So flying very, very fast in the atmosphere, greater than Mach 5. So that made its way into my work at Johnson through space shuttle reentry. Good chunk of any space vehicles reentry processes in the hypersonic regime. I got to learn from some of the foundational engineers in the area, which was really cool. And really got to learn in the analysis land, and kind of going back and forth between that job and school and that job and school over a couple semesters wrapping up my undergrad, really solidified like this is what I want to work on. This is the kind of cutting edge of aerospace and aviation that people really haven't broken the frontier of in quite some time. So after undergrad, went to grad school, had an opportunity either to go back and continue co-oping at Johnson, or take a new opportunity working at a conceptual design company in Atlanta. The origin story there actually involves Bill Nye the Science Guy. We'll get to that later if we have time. But decided to try something new and work for this conceptual design company. And they had a need for a particular skill set that I had built in the work that I was doing at NASA, and worked out really well. So there, I got to work on conceptual design for all sorts of things, things I wasn't particularly interested in, like Hall effect thrusters and in-space propulsion and electrical power systems and things like that. But that helped me kind of learn conceptual design. But what I really, really loved was the high-speed air breathing stuff that I got to work on. So both rocket-based things and in air breathers. So reusable boosters and hypersonic aircraft were the programs that I got to work. And I got really lucky because there was really only one group in the entire US Air Force, or almost the entire US government at the time, that was working on hypersonics. We basically killed all of our hypersonics programs after the financial crisis and sequestration. And there was one little group at the Air Force Research Laboratory at Wright-Patt Air Force Base that was still working on this, and that's the group that I happened to get to work for. So I got to work on early conceptual designs for the programs that, since then, a little over 10 years ago now, have now become the hypersonic weapons programs that we have that are pretty close to fielding. So that was pretty neat to see the early days of those. But I even in undergrad, I had an itch to kind of earn an entrepreneurial experience, and what I got wasn't quite that. It was maybe the best of both worlds. But I had an opportunity to take an intrapreneurial experience. So not step out on my own and try to start a company from the very beginning, but within this 20-person small business that was family-owned, basically start up and run a subsidiary. And the ownership there had spent a lot of time understanding the small satellite launch world. I'm sure everybody here at Stanford has paid a lot of attention to that. So much money has been raised off the SpaceWorks small satellite launch forecast over the past decade. It's wild. Yeah, so we saw this.
At least 3 or 4.
I imagine so. Yeah, yeah. Planet was certainly at the beginning of that. So got started in that, and was basically handed a company and said, "It's just you. You don't have any money. We'll pay your salary. Go see what you can do." So it took a year building that and kind of refocus, reorganize the company and the plan that we wanted to take down, and pivoted to a little bit away from small satellite launch and focusing on the kind of first step in the technical roadmap toward that end, which was high-speed flight tests. So this was in 2013. So the company is called Generation Orbit, basically built it up. Won a handful of small government contracts, and over the next 5 years, turned those into about a $15 to $20 million development program for an air-launched liquid rocket that got an X-plane designation as X-60A, which was pretty sweet. So built a team, again, like all bootstrapped, no venture capital. Built a team of a little under 20 people, and that really started in about 2015, so about 3 years. Building that technology, took it through a bunch of ground testing and flight testing, and then got to the point where really for this company to be successful, it was clear to me as a leader, like we needed additional capital. We were not going to be able to move at the pace that was necessary that our customer wanted without injecting some private capital to drive not just like equipment and scaling and so forth, but the talent that we thought we were going to need. The family ownership didn't want to go that route, and I don't blame them. You're like, hey, we've had this company for 20 years. Let's bet the farm on these 4 kids. So I don't blame them at all. But this was now like 2018. We'd gotten through a bunch of milestones, and we continued to pay attention to what was going on in the DoD hypersonics world, and it was clear that everybody was laser focused on hypersonic weapons, and rightly so. I mean, that was the technology, an area where we were kind of very far behind some of our nation-state competitors, and kind of the first natural application of a very difficult technology to a real operational mission. But with that kind of myopic lens that I think the DoD was looking at, nobody was really looking at like, okay, let's say we're successful at like catching up or getting on par with our adversaries here. What's next? And for us, that was hypersonic aircraft. That was like wildly clear. Like take reusability and bring it to hypersonic systems for the military. And then as we kind of continued to mull around this idea, it also became clear like, okay, reusable hypersonic aircraft are like fundamentally a dual-use technology. If you can take off in one place, fly really fast, and land somewhere else, what you do in between, whether you take pictures, shoot missiles, drop bombs, whatever, you can also carry things with you from point A to point B. And that opens up a pretty wild commercial opportunity in the end game, which is like orders of magnitude larger than the national security applications of the technology. But it was also clear, like, we're not just going to go raise billions of dollars to go build a commercial passenger aircraft. So we had seen a bunch of money going into this like high-speed mobility space, but together with like the experience that myself and my co-founders had, who all came from SpaceX and Blue Origin, we worked together for a couple years with the military applications and private capital coming in. There was no like defense tech like investing space at the time, but we kind of had a hunch that there is an appetite for this type of technology and these types of capabilities for our customer set, and that's really like the core thing that matters. Like if your customers are there and they want what you're building, like money will come. So that was kind of the origin story of us founding Hermeus.
Great, and I'm going to pause you right there. Since I love a good origin story, I also want to ask the audience here. So how many of you guys are undergrads? Raise your hands. All right, how many of you are grad students? And how many of you are members of the community but neither undergrads nor grad students? All right, awesome. I love to have a sense of who we're talking to. Great origin story. I want to follow up on that, but there are two things that you mentioned in that first answer that I want to follow up on. Why did they kill hypersonics?
Oh, well, I mean, they killed a lot of things during sequestration.
Right, yeah.
So hypersonics has been like murdered multiple times over history. I think the first time was probably around like the space shuttle days. So we built the X-15. It was an experimental rocket plane that was reusable. It flew 199 times. It would have flown 200 if it hadn't snowed in the desert. That's a true story. And like, so we had hypersonic reusable systems in the 1950s and 1960s, and the data that was gathered through operating that vehicle, I won't call it an airplane, we can argue about that later, but like that created the data set that was needed to go develop and design the space shuttle. But we went the rocket route. So the kind of flying fast in the atmosphere really kind of like dove off a little bit after that. And then it was resurrected in the 1980s with a program called the National Aerospace Plane. So this was a single stage to orbit, like pie in the sky dream of a system that was too good to be true, some people said. Turns out it was indeed too good to be true. So we had poured like the nation's brain trust into this vehicle. I think we were spending like $10 billion a year on this. We had 10,000 people working on this thing that was never going to work. So that eventually got canceled. And that created a really bad taste in people's mouths around the hypersonic technology. It was always something that was like, 10 years in the future and always will be. So why should we invest in it? And then we had a little bit of a kind of a renaissance around it from the science community. So NASA had a program called the X-43, which was the first hydrogen-powered scramjet vehicle. So it's supersonic combustion ramjet, so air-breathing, really high speed. That was flown in the early 2000s. I think they flew it 2 or 3 times. And then the Air Force had another program called the X-51, which was the first like long-duration cruise scramjet vehicle that was ever built. It flew for about 5 minutes. You laugh, but like that's like a huge achievement in the hypersonics world. So of course, like we had the SR-71 Blackbird and everything back in the day, but that like renaissance in hypersonics was killed by sequestration. Yep. Like there was just no money, like not enough money to do the things we had to do with the Department of Defense. And this was, of course, in the midst of the global war on terror. And hypersonics just was on the chopping block. So you saw it in the DoD, you saw it in NASA, really everywhere. And then the next resurrection that came back was, so one of the things that we did do in the like X-43, X-51 days, we published everything. Which means we did the homework for all of our adversaries around the world, and they, fortunate for them, didn't have sequestration to deal with, so they spent that 7-8 year period not just sitting around twiddling their thumbs, but building and flying hypersonic systems. So that was how we kind of got behind in the technology space, and now we have China with missiles that can really hold our carrier strike groups at risk, and which is kind of an unacceptable risk posture for the country. And that's the thing that has now rekindled interest in hypersonic weapons. These are, of course, weapons that fly fast in the atmosphere. And not for the same mission set. We have different mission sets with our concepts of operations, but that's kind of been this ebb and flow of hypersonics over the years. It's like the 17-year itch.
Look, that's a great explanation. I appreciate you sharing it with the class, because I think one of the things you'll hear as you hear from different folks over the course of this quarter is, our DoD, despite its large budget, can't do everything. And it's making a series of choices about where it's spending its money, where it's not spending its money. Sometimes those are the correct choices, sometimes those are the incorrect choices, right? And it represents opportunities for entrepreneurs like AJ to see a gap, see we need this, and for whatever reason, DoD hasn't built this themselves or can't build them themselves, let's go after that opportunity. So I think it's a really exciting time to be an entrepreneur in this space, because given the threat challenge that we're facing as a country, the number of things we need versus the amount of resources that we have is the first one exceeds the second one, and that's always a great sort of market sign for an entrepreneur to go out and start something.
Yeah, if I could comment on
Sure.
on that. So the situation we're in is we have a threat environment that is evolving on a daily basis, becoming more and more difficult to deal with. I mean, you see what's going on in Ukraine and Israel and the Middle East, which is all a precursor, a vision into the future of what could happen in the South China Sea, which of course is the thing that we all want to deter from happening. And then you pair that with a defense budget that isn't even keeping up with inflation, plus 98, 99% of that defense budget goes to a small number of defense primes that have been around for decades and decades and really have no incentive to deliver more for less, change whatever you want to call it. So the defense budget isn't going to double, I'll tell you that right now. And if we're going to continue to deter conflict, then we have to solve those problems differently. And that's where the opportunity space is for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. So, all right, let's get back to the evolution now that we've moved past the origin story of Hermeus. You guys are out there. First of all, how did you find your co-founders? There's 3 co-founders in addition to yourself, Hermeus. How did you find them? And then how did you think about this transition point from being an entrepreneur to being an entrepreneur and raising outside capital?
Yeah, so don't laugh. LinkedIn. I'm notoriously good at cold LinkedIn emails. So I hired all 3 of them at my previous company. 2 of them were just actual cold LinkedIn, I've never met you before. I looked up your profile. I need a GNC engineer. You're graduating from Penn State soon. Okay, let's talk. And another one was, hey, you're at SpaceX. You're doing aerodynamics and systems engineering stuff. I read his dissertation. It's the only dissertation I've ever read, but it was about very, very, very much this high-speed flight test thing that we were doing at Go at the time. So.
If you're working on a dissertation, don't worry. At least 2 people will read yours.
So here's the trick. When you publish your dissertation, it goes gets printed, gets put in the library, put a $20 bill in it, come back 5-10 years later, see if it's still there. Yeah, and then you know. But anyway, yeah. So and then. One of my other co-founders had applied. He was at Blue Origin at the time and wanted to move back east to be closer to his family. So we worked together for 3 years at Generation Orbit, and with a less than 20-person team trying to fly a rocket off of a Gulfstream airplane, you tend to be down in the trenches quite a bit together. So it's not like you're the CEO of this company, you're sitting in your high tower making sure everything happens and just playing with the chess pieces. No, you were in there turning wrenches, bleeding in the trenches, making calls left and right, and that really builds a very strong bond amongst teammates, and that I think was one of the most important things for us starting the company when we did. I mean, we were mostly in our 30s. So 3 of us are married, 1 of us is single, and 1 had 3 kids. So not a normal setup necessarily for quitting your relatively good paying jobs and starting an airplane company. But what we did have along, so we had a couple things here. So like, we had conviction in the mission, what we were trying to do, the outcome if we were successful being significantly large, and we had trust in each other. And I think that was the kind of core set of things that really allowed us to take this risk. We also like kind of time boxed everything, so we're like, we think this will work. We're pretty sure this is gonna work, but it might not. So like, let's set expectations with our families. So we were like, all right, we're gonna take 6 months and see if we can prove our thesis correct, which the thesis at the time was basically like, you can raise money against this idea with a PowerPoint, because like we didn't have any money. I think we started the company with like $12,000. And we did all sorts of like fun little things. We did a bunch of CFD that we got paid for, that paid for some flights to San Francisco for fundraising. We got invited to YC interviews. We didn't get in, which was fun, but it was a free trip to San Francisco for other investor meetings. But
Why should you say why they didn't take you?
Yeah.
I will say this, by the way. Investors will tell you all sorts of reasons why they say no. It's rarely the truthful reason.
Yeah, so these are actually some hilarious ones. We're worried about how much fire it's going to make.
Okay.
We're worried about you giving the passengers concussions. I'm like, guys. Oh, and then there was another guy who was like, yeah, I'll be fine with my G650. It's cool.
Okay.
It's cool. Like, all right, dude. I mean, like, so that was fun. I think it's a complex business, and to be able to convey it to people in 3 minutes is really difficult. And we were by no means good enough at it. We had 4 engineers trying to communicate with other humans. We were lucky, like we just didn't stare at our shoes the whole time. Yeah, so it didn't get in there, but I mean, Sam Altman wrote a pretty sizable check later, so I'll take that as a win.
Right, and so then you raised your first round?
Yeah, so raised our first round. So we gave ourselves 6 months. It took us literally every hour of every day of every month of those 6 months to do it. I was on stage at a pitch competition when the money came in. We ended up losing the pitch competition, which is hilarious. But the firm invested anyway, so it was all good at a higher valuation. So Coastal Ventures was our first money in. I got to know a couple of the Skybox founders, so another batch of Stanford grads, in this kind of 6-month process of learning like how to spell VC and how this all worked. Our path was actually like quite similar to theirs. KV was the first money into them as well. They were the first kind of mover in this small satellite market, venture backed. They were the first exit. So I learned a lot from Dan Birkenstock and John Fennick and CY.
I think Dan talked to this class last year. Is that right? Yeah. So great guy, still floating around here. He came back. He dropped out of his PhD program to start Skybox. And once they sold it to Google, he actually came back and finished his PhD, which is pretty unusual. Okay, yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So PhD now, hypersonics.
What's that? Yep, exactly. So you raised the money from Khosla, which is fantastic, right? And I'm impressed that you got it done in 6 months. If we'd known each other and you asked my advice, I said, you need to give yourself at least a year, to try.
Hey, we like to move fast, right?
Right, yeah. So I think that's fantastic. You started the company in Atlanta.
That's right.
Talk about why you started in Atlanta and what's it like building a company in sort of a non-traditional environment like that. Yeah,
so I'll get to the good things, but like, why did we build it there? Well, we didn't have any money to move. Okay. So we're like, well, we're doing it here. But a number of things that we found of like, there are a lot of people who want to work on the hardest problems with the best people. And in aerospace, like most of those problems and people are in like Los Angeles. There's other places, obviously like San Francisco, Seattle, a few others, but all West Coast. People move out here in droves because they want to do that. They want to work on the hardest problems with the best people. So we had a hunch of like, well, we have a really hard problem. And if we can haul together like a set of good people, likely we can attract other good people who maybe actually do want to live on the East Coast because their family's closer, the cost of living is better. You can live a very different lifestyle than you live out here. That ended up being like reasonably true. I mean, we've been able to, I'll say like repatriate a lot of folks who really only moved out to LA because like that's where SpaceX was. So given an opportunity to get in the early days of a company working on a technical problem and a business problem just as hard as what SpaceX is doing was really attractive. Continue to build there. We've got a solid like 110,000 square foot manufacturing facility. But also, like over time, we've expanded our footprint. So we have We have people in LA, we've got a shop there. That footprint's going to continue to expand over the coming years. And a test facility down in Florida and a presence in DC. So like fundamentally, as much as I want us to be a hardware company in one building, like on one floor, in one room, where you really get all of the awesome collaboration that really creates great products. The reality of the world is that isn't the case. So you better be good at building a company over multiple places. So I think we'll continue to grow in Atlanta. I think our LA presence is going to grow like significantly. I wouldn't be surprised if in a couple of years LA was as big or bigger than Atlanta. But yeah, it's a great spot.
So tell the group a little bit now about the technical architecture. What's your approach to what you're building, and what's the differentiator or the secret sauce?
Sure. So hypersonic airplane, what do you need to build a hypersonic airplane? A couple kind of core things that are hard. First thing is an engine. You need an engine where you can take off from the ground and then cruise at Mach 5 for an extended period of time, come back, land, and do it again. And the reason you need kind of that type of architecture is kind of, well, it's one core thing, but it applies in both the military applications and the civilian applications. You need to be able to integrate with like existing systems, existing infrastructure. It's hard enough to build a new airplane if you have to build a new airplane and the, whatever the hydrogen equivalent of charging infrastructure is, or methane or whatever, in like all these places across the world. And if like the customer that you're selling your airplanes to like uses Jet A or kerosene as their fuel, you better use that. 'Cause you're not going to like create a new airplane and like revolutionize the whole fuel usage of the DoD. Like, don't try to solve too hard problems. So that drove us to an architecture that was air breathing all the way through. A gas turbine engine for low-speed operations, and then we chose a ramjet for high-speed operations. The reason for that is because it was actually driven by the commercial side of the business. So we picked like Mach 5 as the speed that we wanted to fly, because from a commercial perspective, literally the planet Earth is not large enough to need to go any faster. When you have a constraint on acceleration, like how fast you can accelerate axially, if you go much faster than Mach 5, then you're just like accelerating the whole time and not cruising at all. If the planet were bigger for like Jupiter or something, that'd be cool to go faster. But rockets are a little bit different, but we'll
give people some sense. At Mach 5, you're going New York to London in
90 minutes.
90 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a little under 3 hours across the Pacific.
Yeah.
So it's fast. Yeah, your movie selection is pretty small.
And by the way, some of us are old enough to remember the Concorde, right? Which was sort of, what was Concorde?
Mach 2.
Mach 2,
so this is,
right? So this was a jet that, I forget, was it the French airline? Who operated?
British Airways and
British
Air France. Yeah.
Air France, yeah, operated it. And you could go to New York to Paris much faster than you can today, but it had a fire and people got scared and it got cut, right?
It died of old age.
Died of old age.
Yeah, I mean, it flew for 30 years and it did have one accident.
For those of us who live on airplanes, we wish we could get everywhere a little faster.
Which we're trying, we're trying.
All right, so, sorry, interrupt.
Yeah, so propulsion, core thing, make sure you can get up to Mach 5 and then an efficient propulsion system to cruise at that spot. So ramjet was what we chose for that. And we came up with a pretty simple, straightforward way of putting those two engines together, keeping the cross-sectional area very small, so it keeps the drag small, the amount of thrust that you need small. And we've been building like multiple iterations of that over the years. Like we've built like 5 or 6 at this point. We've proven out the whole architecture from not moving on the ground so far up to about Mach 4. We've also demonstrated the ability to switch between the two modes of operation, so ramjet and turbojet, proved that out in a wind tunnel. And now the next step is like go do this in the air.
And what's your first step for DoD in terms of the platform that you're going to deliver compared to the passenger jet?
Sure, so from like a product perspective?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, so first like product use case for the DoD for the technology stack that we're building is high-speed flight tests. So going back to the roots of expanding the nation's flight test infrastructure. Nobody else has figured it out in the like 10 years since we were working at Go. So airplanes are a great way to do that. You get up to really high speed, carry an experiment with you, have sensors look at you, release other things, come back, land, do it again. That's kind of one of the, I think, the core enablers for expanding the nation's flight test infrastructure. Not just to like have cheaper, less expensive like means of access to these kinds of conditions, but more importantly, more frequent. I think the Chinese do about 10x as many high-speed flight tests as we do on an annual basis. So how are we going to expand our ability to do that? Reusability to the game helps with that too. So that's step one. And then you can start using your imaginations as to once you have an operational, high speed even, let alone hypersonic aircraft that's autonomous, doesn't have people on board. What can it do? Like the core parts of the value proposition that you get from flying high. So to fly high, you have to fly fast. To fly fast, you have to fly high. So that creates a pretty survivable platform. Like it's hard to shoot you down. So much in the way the SR-71 was never shot down. Missiles are a little bit faster today, but there are some interesting, unique physics things that once you're flying Mach 5, you become very, very difficult to shoot down. So you get survivability out of flying fast. Which is like a core enabler for penetrating operations. Like when you want to do something behind enemy lines, or where an adversary doesn't want you to do something, but you do want to do something, you need to be able to like get in there and not get shot down, or not have your camera shot down, your weapon shot down, all those types of things. So leveraging speed for that is a core element of the value proposition. The other thing, which may be a little bit less intuitive, is responsiveness. So like covering long distances quickly. And this is all about like getting inside your adversary's OODA loop. So like how quickly they observe what's happening, orient themselves, make a decision, and then take an action. If you can make 5 moves in the time it takes them to make 1, you're probably going to win. I mean, if you did that in chess, you'd win every time. So the responsiveness is the other core value that the customer is looking for from high-speed systems.
Right. So you could pursue just a commercial market, or you could pursue just a DoD business. You chose to do both. Help me understand the pros and cons of
yeah,
both.
so I'll be a little bit specific about how we chose to do both. Yeah. We chose not to do both at the same time. Yeah. We chose to do defense first and then commercial. So a couple reasons for that. I'll start with the commercial. Like, why wouldn't you just go straight to commercial? There are other companies trying to build high-speed commercial aircraft first without building a defense business along the way. From my perspective, like the amount of capital that you need to do that, I don't know, it's billions of dollars. There are ways you can make it like not 10, but it's going to be more than 1. And like even in the best fundraising environment the world has ever seen, you're never going to raise that amount of capital just from scratch without having like a real business alongside. So the core driver for us from a fundraising perspective, and I think what's allowed us to be like reasonably successful in raising money, is like people aren't investing in that long-term dream today. They're investing in the intermediate steps and markets along the way that can actually provide like a real sustainable business, and that's where the military applications and the defense markets come in. So if, the other thing for us is like we're very hardware rich, like to build a lot of hardware, build a lot of airplanes, to learn the things you need to learn to build the next thing. And you can't do that overnight. It takes time. We're trying to do it incredibly quickly. We're trying to build basically 1 airplane per year, 1 brand new airplane per year, which is kind of unheard of. But that takes time and money. And if you're going to bring a commercial aircraft to market, I would really prefer it not to be like a 1st or 2nd generation system because of the demands of the customers in that marketplace. Like, hey, great, you've got a Mach 5 airplane that can get you across the Atlantic Ocean in 90 minutes, but its maintenance record like only makes it available, let's say, 60% of the time. That's not a great product if you're constantly like having maintenance problems and all those types of things. So like you better work out all those kinks and all those corner cases before you bring something where you are really banking on the tip of the envelope in performance to deliver the value your customer is looking for. So being able to iterate in the military space also without people on board, that's one huge set of like tech that I didn't even talk about yet, is like, okay, great, how do you keep people alive when the skin temperatures are 800 and 900 degrees Fahrenheit, and if the cabin loses pressure at 100,000 feet, everybody's blood boils in 20 seconds. You don't have to handle any of that on the military side when you're working with autonomous systems. So it allows you to like focus on the risks that are most important to get to the next stage of the business writ large, not just the technology set.
So we've invested in a lot of cool/crazy technologies at In-Q-Tel, but hypersonics is right up there. We have one investment that's bringing back the woolly mammoth. That's pretty cool as well.
When's Megalodon coming? That's what I'm
yeah, right, exactly. So very cool. So just to wrap up here on the company, you now raised how much money?
Pretty close to about $200 million.
$200 million. It's Khosla, it's Canaan Partners. Is it Canaan Partners? I forget what Canaan's last name.
Canaan Partners.
Yeah, Partners. Sam Altman wrote a check. Other insignificant investors.
In-Q-Tel.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you.
RTX Ventures, so Raytheon Technologies venture arm, Founders Funds, Bling Capital, Steve Case's Rise of the Rest fund. and then a couple others as well.
Right. Okay. I want to just pivot to culture here a little bit, because you've talked a lot about that and posted a bunch of stuff. And I don't know if you want to mention your Twitter handle, X handle, sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I enjoy your posts. But about culture, and you have something you call, I think, frontier leadership. Talk about how you think about culture, and when did you start to install it, and how do you manage it as you grow as a company? Because now you got a couple hundred employees, right? Or
almost 250.
250, yeah. So.
How much time do we have left?
Yeah. 5 minutes.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Yeah. Well, let me be prophetic in 5 minutes. Yeah. I mean, like, culture is literally everything. I mean, Vinod said it best. Like, the team you build is the company that you build. Like, I learn more and more every single day what that actually means in practice. And like, what it kind of means is, like, you have an idea about how things need to be done to achieve something that nobody has achieved before. And usually that how is, I'll say, different than how like other established companies are doing things or have been doing things for a long time. Most people will tell you it's wrong and it won't work. And yet, like, it is literally the thing that underpins the value of the company. Like, we're not trying to, like, build a patent portfolio for all the stuff that we're doing. We're just really trying to build airplanes faster than anybody has ever built them before, because we think that pace of iteration in hardware is what's necessary to solve the technical challenges to actually build hypersonic airplanes. And like, that's a people problem. It's not a technology problem. Like, we've tried to make this literally as dumb as possible from a technology perspective. And like, DARPA doesn't like us because we make things not DARPA hard. I'm like, okay, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's hard to build a hypersonic airplane in a couple years, so I haven't seen one from you guys yet. But anyway, not for lack of trying. There were definitely some DARPA programs in those.
Billions of dollars spent, but
yeah, sure. But we have this fundamental belief, and this really comes from a lot of the blood that's in the company that comes from SpaceX, in the concept of the responsible engineer. So it is an engineer who not only is accountable to his or her own responsibilities, but really to the end outcome of the business. That's a really hard thing to conceptualize for a person, whether it's you're coming straight out of school or you've been in industry for 5 or 10 years. Really thinking about and acting toward how what you do and what you're responsible actually delivers toward the outcome that the company is trying to create. So I mean, I'll give you an example. If you're an engineer and you're like working on the nozzle of the engine, you're like, okay, I'm going to make this the best nozzle I possibly can. And engineers love hard problems. I mean, I talked about, like, people want to work on hard problems. Well, engineers love hard problems. We also love making problems hard. And that's like the thing that you have to just get out the door. My VP of Advanced Development, who runs all of our engineering team, he's got like a number of these like wildly awesome pithy sayings that I've integrated into how I think about the world. So I'll give Steve Ferger all the credit. He like pushes his team like, look, guys, solve the right problem adequately, not the wrong problem well. And like, let that sink in and think about it for a little while. Most of the world is actually like solving the wrong problems. They're trying to do it really well. Everybody loves to do good work. Great. Your good work is in defining the problem, not like overdoing the solution to it. And the only way you really get to like calibrate yourself to what the right problem is understanding the context of the business and what we are trying to do. So, from a leadership perspective, it's on me to make sure that end goal, that outcome, is crystal clear to the entire team. And it's not just like I wrote it down on paper and it's good. You have to like beat the drum on it, communicate it over and over and over and over and over again until it's done. So like the company's culture and how people act is really the only thing that can deliver that. And to build a culture, like over time as you're scaling as a business, like it's easy to do when you're 4 people in a basement because you're literally spending every waking hour with each other. So you have a pretty hive mind. And you're like, you started a company, you quit your job, so you're pretty well aligned as well. Now, how do you do that with a team of 20 people, 50 people, 100 people, 200 people? All your systems break at almost each of those little inflection points. And we didn't realize until after it broke a couple times. Now I think we're much better. We're a little bit more proactive and get like, okay, we're going to catch it before and set ourselves up for success. But the way that culture scales, as you're like trying to grow people like quickly, like you're trying to grow the scale of a team because you know you need a large team to build aircraft. You can't build an airplane with 5 people. You need herd immunity. Like you need more than 70% of your team aligned to your culture. And across your management team, you probably need like 85 to 90% of your people leaders aligned to that culture. Otherwise, you're just fighting cultural battles all day, every day, and not making actual progress toward what you're trying to do. And once you're above that like 70% mark, it's a complete like heuristic, but it works for vaccines, so I guess it works here. Once you're above that 70%, and then, like as you scale, when somebody new comes into the business, like 70% of the things that they hear are going to be aligned to what they need to hear, and that's enough to like indoctrinate them well enough, and for the bar to be held over them from a cultural standpoint to like where they're going to acclimate to, hey, what is expected of me here? What do I need to do? How do I need to be? Very, very quickly. Versus the opposite of like, you get these little pockets of people and companies that are like misaligned from that culture, maybe because they all got hired at the same time, didn't have a leader that was beating the drum on the culture and explaining this is what it is and holding the bar over it. And like those little pockets can grow into a cancerous thing that devours company. Yeah, so it is like wildly difficult to do, but also like that's where the bar is. Okay, I got one more question that I'm turning to you guys for questions. So if you have one or want to start thinking about one, now is the time to do that. What advice do you have for any entrepreneurs that are in the audience today? Oh, do it. Yeah, I mean, you will convince yourself of a million reasons not to do something. I think generally humans undervalue the upside of taking a risk and overvalue the downside. Like you're looking at a risk, you're looking at a situation. Generally, most folks will look at how bad is it going to be if this fails. And I think like if you're able to think about risk in like a systematic way, which like how many folks are engineers in here? All right, cool, about half. So you guys got a little bit of indoctrination. Everybody else, listen up. Focus on the upside first. When you look at the upside, what could this be? How good could this be? That is really the only thing that matters at the beginning. And once you've qualified the upside, like, oh, damn, like this could be massive, both in terms of like the impact that it has on a large group of people, the impact on myself, my co-founders, whatever it is, however you define value. Like once you've qualified that, like, okay, this is big enough, this is good enough, then you go and look at the downsides. And then really all you have to do is mitigate the worst case downside. And then like, if you can accept the worst thing that can happen when you're taking a risk, everything is upside. So like in our example, like, so we had to make a decision to quit our jobs. But we time box things. And it's like, all right, we're gonna take 6 months. And if we don't figure it out in 6 months, then we'll go get real jobs. And like if that outcome happened, us and our families, we were okay accepting that. Because like we're like, what's the worst that could happen? Like, we become more employable in 6 months? Great. And the upside, if successful, obviously like very, very large, and we were highly convicted about that. So yeah, I think if you really think about things when you come to decisions or crossroads in personal life, career, companies, start with the upside, qualify that, understand it, and then mitigate or like underwrite the worst case downside. And yeah, it's all awesome. There.
Great. All right, who has a question? Oh, sorry, we'll clap for you first. Questions, right there. I think the bulk of the question was, you talked a lot about the engine, but how much autonomy are you thinking about putting in the platform there, and how do you think about having people in the thing versus not needing to have people in the autonomy? Is that a fair summary? Okay,
yeah,
great.
yeah. Okay. Yeah, so our approach is like not to put a person on any of these airplanes until like basically we're flying people in the commercial world. We think we can do everything we need to do with uncrewed autonomous platforms up front. So a couple things about our approach there. We are not building the like mission level autonomy stack. We're not building like the AI pilot for our airplanes. We have enough hard problems to go solve. We need to focus on those. And I think there are enough other companies who are like further along and much better at that particular thing that will actually accelerate we'll accelerate toward our end goals by partnering with them versus trying to build it ourselves. Plus, at the end of the day, like Air Force is a customer, they're going to pick which pilot goes in the seat, whether it's a human pilot or an autonomous pilot. They're going to pick which flavor, whether it's Anduril, Shield, Merlin, whoever it is. Our customer is going to make that decision. I don't think they're going to vertically integrate fully and have like one pilot for everything. So we build up to the interface, basically the same way as you would with a human pilot on board. All of our aircraft right now, they're all remote pilots. So like we have like basically zero autonomy on top of them because our goal here is like there are specific risks that we need to go get data on to get to the next step. And like the first one for us is takeoff and landing of a high-speed aircraft. So we don't need any autonomy for that. So it's really like get that airplane in the air, get what we need, and build from there. So I think you'll start to see autonomy packages making their way onto our airplanes in the next like 1 to 2 years, mostly driven by the customer, not by our own technical things. But yeah, it's totally the way. It's like you get to decouple like safety and mission assurance from the aircraft itself, and that really allows you, I think, to push the bounds of what the aircraft can do and take more risk in hardware. Because like, it's only money. Now, like it's a lot of money. We're like we make a $20 million hole in the desert. Yeah, it's not great, but if we actually live up to this like hardware-rich approach to development, we're back in flight within hopefully a few months because the next aircraft is ready and coming right afterwards, and we're able to do that without putting human life at risk.
So the question was, on the commercial side, why hypersonic instead of supersonic?
Supersonic's too slow. So, I mean, I say that tongue-in-cheek a little bit, but like, what's the value proposition in the commercial market for flying faster with aviation, right? It's like, can you get a day back? Can you like allow people to sleep in their own beds instead of on an airplane? And like, Concorde kind of did that, and it kind of did it over like one part of the market. When you accelerate up to 5 times the speed of sound, and now your flight is 90 minutes across the Atlantic Ocean, that's a regional flight. Like today, you can get anywhere up and down the eastern seaboard of the United States in 90 minutes. Now, if you bring Europe and the United States as close as like London and Paris are by train today, the amount of trade that will drive is wild. And you really don't get that down at like Mach 1.7 or Mach 2. You can maybe make like one trip. You probably still have a hotel night. Yeah, and then I think that's from like the pure commercial perspective. I think from the like broader business perspective of how do you get there financially, the marketplace for that technology stack in the military does play a big role because like the whole idea here of like don't go commercial first is because like build a large growing financial foundation of a business that gets you the access to capital that you need and the like frankly like stay alive time. I mean, like the FAA doesn't pay you for certification, the Air Force does when you're working for them. So like you have to fund yourself through, I don't know, 5 years of certification minimum. And if you can do that with free cash flow from the business, it's a much better spot. So yeah, definitely like a technical product reason, but also a business reason.
Okay, I think we got time for one more question. So the question is about culture and in particular about remote work, the trade-off between enabling or allowing remote work and having your employees all in one dungeon was the metaphor used to get that collaboration and culture built.
Yeah, so COVID was pretty foundational for us there. I think we were 8 people when COVID hit, and we just finished a major hardware milestone, so we got like super lucky. So we all were like forced to go do it just like the rest of the world. And we came back in person, full time, 5 days a week. And we've maintained that culture at all of our sites. There's definitely like a flexibility that we like to offer to our employees. It's like, yeah, you're going to be in person, but you get like everybody has things they need to do in their lives. So we came up with a strategy, and then you also have like people who are like on the road 200 days out of the year. So like, why do I care where you live? So like we actually thought very deeply about this and put together like a strategy for like what does it mean? Like where should I be doing my work? And kind of a progression of like, okay, start with this first. If that breaks, go to this. If that breaks, go to this. And I think it's really helped to bring that level of clarity to the team. Like be where the work is the biggest thing. And like I think if you have the luxury of optimizing for keeping everybody in the same physical space as long as you can, do it. Now, there's going to be times when the right thing to do is open up another site. And like, we're always fundamentally going to have multiple locations. So like, we better be damn good at working asynchronously and across different time zones, different physical locations. But like, whether it's at LA or in Atlanta, everything's still in person. I mean, you can't like turn a wrench over Zoom. You can't build an airplane that way. So keeping people near the hardware, especially like for a hardware company, that is the core to the whole thing, and maintaining that like responsible engineer culture. Yep.
Well, AJ, thank you so much. Now it's time to clap.